Welcome to Midlife Unfiltered for a start. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you listening. Sometimes something that I forget to do is actually say who we are and what we're doing. I'm Erica. This is Anita. We're so happy to have you here. But what we thought we would talk about today is the body. So the body is very much my world. Mind-body relationship is very much my world. And at the moment, I am running my Soma Home course, which is all about reconnecting to the body, learning how to regulate as a highly sensitive person, and essentially learning to speak the body's language. All in the pursuit of a relationship with ourselves that is loving and kind and feels very much like a gentle, soft place to land, not like a battleground, right? Not somewhere where we're up against ourselves all the time. And so part of what I do in that program, which is what Anita has alluded to, is support women to connect with how they feel and to be able to essentially interpret the language that their body is speaking, which is not something that any of us are typically taught anywhere, right? That's not something that we learn at school, certainly. And in fact, we probably learn at school and in our working lives to do the opposite. We really learn to disconnect because it's kind of more helpful for productivity if we don't know what's going on. And so I thought we could talk, and this was lovely because this was actually Anita's suggestion, talk a little bit about that and why it's so important to be able to check in with our body and notice like, oh, I'm carrying a whole bunch of tension that I didn't even notice that I had, which is feedback that I get from women all the time, right? That they get to the end of the day and they're like, I'm riddled with tension that obviously has accumulated over the day, but I didn't know it was happening, not until I stopped and then was like, everything feels terrible. And so, talking a little bit about, well, then how do we connect with that earlier so that it doesn't take our body screaming at us to be able to pay attention to what's going on?
Yeah.
Is that a good summation?
I think, yeah, perfect. Fantastic. I think what prompted me to suggest this as a topic, not only because I've been learning from you, which has heightened my awareness. Hello, number one, step for change. But I was watching the footy on last night. I'm a Cats fan, for any Aussies, AFL lovers out there. And during the game, I'm watching with my daughter, fellow AFL lover, and I noticed I was doing this. And yeah, I'm sitting there, relaxed back on what I thought was relaxed back on the couch, watching the footy going. And I said to Layla, I'm clenching my fists. Sure, it was a tense game and it was a close score and everything, but I'm not playing. So really, why do I need to be clenching my fists? And then the other thing that I notice a lot that I'm doing is I feel it in my shoulders. And even when I'm sitting, typing at my computer, or again, just sitting, not even in the throes of doing something obviously stressful. So not even after a big day, but now I'm picking it up during as well. I'm going, oh, why are you holding it there? Like, you don't seem harassed. You don't seem stressed. So why is that happening? And now I'm picking up on it and going, oh, let's just, release that. As you say, let's let it melt and just release it. So I find that really interesting too, Erica, is I would have associated tenseness with stress. But unless I'm missing something in my body big time, like maybe my brain is sensing stress, but I don't feel it in any other way. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you are.
Is there
and there's a lot of there's a lot of pieces to it. I mean, so it's really interesting because that thing about like, surely that should be a stress response, right? But sometimes we forget what is stress. And I think that's a really interesting place to start because one of the things that I very much believe is that our body can act as a barometer for what is actually going on for us that our brain hasn't caught up with yet. because stuff often happens in our body and our nervous system before we have conscious awareness of what it might mean or what it is. So if we can learn to speak our body's language, we can often pick up on things that we might not otherwise be aware of are contributing to our experience of stress. Because we often think of stress as being really big things, right?
Mm, mm,
We think of stress as being, I mean, and not even necessarily really big things, but obvious things, right? We have a deadline that we feel like we can't meet. We have a bill that we feel like we can't pay. We have a health problem that we feel like we can't control. We have, grief and loss and all of those things. And we think of those things as being the only sources of stress that we have. But the truth is, and particularly for the cohort of women that I work with, which is the highly sensitive women of the world, stress comes in lots of other forms,
right.
like our environment. And if we have competing noises that we have to deal with, and if we have bright lights that are interfering with our sense of safety and calm, um, the background worries that we might have about our children or our parents or our job or our finances that maybe aren't front and center, but are still simmering in the background.
Mm,
And the truth is that when it comes to stress, it is cumulative,
mm,
right? So, as an example, I didn't sleep particularly well last night. And I know that that started me off at a level of stress that was different than it would have been if I'd slept really well.
mm.
Then I had a little bit of an argument with one of my children. Then I had a little bit of an argument with my husband, and it crept me up today, right? Which is part of the reason why I'm feeling a little heightened. And so we forget sometimes that stress can come in different ways
Yeah.
and it won't always feel very obvious, but our body will never lie. It knows so much before we have conscious awareness of it. The other piece of that, though, is that sitting still is not what our body wants to do.
Ah,
We're not built for that.
yeah. I think you're onto something there with me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you might be like, yeah, the stress thing's not it, right? And I know how much you put into your self-care, so you could well be right. But the body does not like to sit still.
Mm,
So when we feel fidgety, when we feel like, like I'm starting to get a little bit sore, you've got a body that is designed to move and you haven't moved it.
mm,
It's
mm,
giving you a sign to move. Like it can literally be that simple.
mm.
So often I describe it like this, and this is the way it's been described to me in the past. Your brain is essentially the black box. Your brain doesn't have direct access to sort of seeing exactly what's going on and to be able to see things from the outside. Like it's on the inside and it's having to use the senses to
The
pull
cues.
information in.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that it does that is through movement. So if I haven't moved my shoulders, right, in 2 hours because I've been,
Mm.
then it doesn't know if I can use my shoulders anymore. Like in a very arbitrary, like in a very basic sense of thinking about how our bodies work, we have to use our body in order for our body to remain, uh, you know, loose.
At its
That's not
best.
quite it's not quite the right word, but we often think of exercise as only being a way of building muscle or losing
Yeah. Yeah.
weight or doing
Mm,
these things. But it's also just like if you don't take your bike out for a while, it's going to get squeaky. If
mm,
you don't take your car out, sometimes it won't start very well. It's the same with your body. If you don't use it, you are going to lose it. And that can be on a very long term scale where we
mm.
start to see as we age that if we haven't continued to do things like get up and down off the floor or, different movements, we will start to lose the capacity because, use it or lose it. But it can be true on a more micro scale as well, where it's like I haven't really done much for a couple of hours while I've been at my desk. Everything's tight. It's not everybody's first instinct to move your body, but that's often what your body is seeking.
Asking. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Asking of you. Yeah. And I guess the difference for me is like I used to get a lot of neck pain, and I knew that was because of my positioning when I was working at the computer all day.
Yeah.
But now my lifestyle's changed. I'm not doing that so much as often. And my neck pain, hello,
Gone.
got
Yeah.
non existent, right? Didn't have
Yeah.
to do anything else.
Yeah.
But it's this feeling of the tension, but not to the point where it's painful. That is new
Yeah.
sensation for me. That next level of awareness potentially where
Mhm.
I'm learning to read my body's cues and knocking on the door, if you like, as you say, just to let us know. Um,
Yeah.
at a much different, is it a different frequency? I don't even know the terminology, but it's not up there on the spectrum. It's
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit quieter. Well, there's this way that we have of sensing. So we have lots of different ways that we sense information and sensory things. So we have what's called exteroception, which is, what you can see, what you can smell, what you can taste, what you can hear, things that you take from the outside in. But then we also have a way of perceiving called interoception, which is how we sense change on the inside of our body. And so when you feel tight muscles, that is interoceptive
Mhm.
because it's something that's on the inside of your body.
Yep.
When you notice, oh, I feel cold, that's interoception. When you notice that you feel hungry, same thing.
Mhm.
And you know that you need to go to the bathroom, same thing. So we can have very different levels of interoceptive capacity.
Yeah.
And like we were saying before, the world that we live in kind of asks us to squash that a little bit
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or push
because,
through.
or push through or ignore it. Like if you think about even just ergonomic furniture, it's encouraging you to stay still for longer
Mm,
rather than move.
mm.
Whereas what your body probably wants is just to move a little bit. Like
Move
you
a
could
bit
sit
more.
in a normal chair, but move more often. It would
Mm.
probably be fine.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas we've got a society that sets us up for more productivity, more output, more money, essentially.
Mm.
So we have to recognize that it is, I don't want to sound like you know, that it's always just about the system, but like in some ways this is about the system, right? The system
Yeah.
makes us more productive people by ignoring those signs. The problem that we have is that we ignore, and then we plummet
Yeah.
into a
We
into a
burn out, get a chronic condition, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So that capacity that you have to interocept, to feel what's happening on the inside of your body, yeah, you're right. Like there might have been a time in your life where you wouldn't have noticed what you're noticing now at all.
Mm, mm,
So it
yeah.
doesn't mean that the feeling's new, it's just that it's new for you to notice it.
Yes.
Yeah.
1000%. That's exactly what's going on, I think.
Whereas what might
Yep.
have happened in the past is it needed to be the headache or it needed to be the really ouchy, pinchy kind of
Mm,
pain before you knew that it was happening.
yeah. Yeah.
So it can be frustrating for people, and I used to have this all the time in my, like, in-person early yoga class days where I would kind of walk around the room and you'd sort of see people's shoulders creeping up around their ears and you'd say, "Oh, like, can you just, like, whew, take an exhale and let that melt a little
Let
bit?"
go. Yeah.
And they would start to notice, "Oh, I didn't even know I was doing that."
Mm.
And then they'd come back the next week and they'd say, "Do you know I do that all the time?" I'm like, "Yep, I believe it." Because we
That's
all
it.
do. We all
Yeah.
do. And that is protective of the body, right? So sometimes, like you said, that is stress driven and it's protective because of stress. It's your body trying to produce the resources that you need to deal with that stress.
Right.
Because oftentimes stress means there's something to fight
Yeah.
or there's something to run away from. So having muscles that are ready to do it makes a lot of sense.
Mm, yeah.
On the other hand, it can also be, I haven't moved these parts of my body and that's what my body's asking, right? But at the end of the day, it is not accidental. It is not your body messing up. It's your body giving you information.
Mm,
But we tend to see it as a society as like, geez, what's wrong with my body? It's
mm.
sore.
Yeah,
And it's like,
what's wrong
well,
with my body? Yes. And it's
always.
not your body. No, it's not
There's
your body.
nothing, yeah. And typically, I mean, there might be your body giving you signs that there is something that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Like with increased interoception, you might pick up on when you're getting sick more quickly. You might be able to pick up on symptoms of illness and things like that. But typically, it's not your body messing up. It's your body trying to. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear the washing machines going on in the other room. It's very loud. It's not your body messing up, and we are so quick to blame our body in those moments. Whereas I would celebrate, oh my gosh, I've noticed that I'm
Yeah.
feeling that. That's huge.
Yeah.
Because when you notice it, you can do something in response to it.
Yeah, and also I think it makes it flipping that mindset and approach to it, I should imagine it'd be like letting more in, then you start to pick up on a hell of a lot more other stuff too, and you're not so, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I just sort of imagine it's a bit like um, a vacuum, things just start to be
Yeah.
sucked in a bit more as you notice more and more. And again, that's a good thing. It's what is my body trying to tell me? You know?
Yes. And it's a good thing so long as you have a willingness and a skill to meet it compassionately.
Yes,
Because
yes,
if you meet it with that, like, "What's wrong with me?"
yeah,
It could be a little frightening. It could be a little, overwhelming in and of itself because you think, "Oh, here's evidence that my body's not working very well."
mhm,
Whereas if we can see it as often I think of it as like, is this an invitation to consider how I need to care for myself in this moment? So where we were at just before we hit record was you were saying, "Do you need a minute?" Like, you clearly
yeah,
kind of heightened. "Do you need a minute?"
yeah,
And I was like, "Let's do it on the call," because I think it's really valuable to walk through, like, how I would notice it in myself. You've given a great example of just being at the computer and being like, "Oh, my shoulders is tight." So in that scenario, what I would do and what I would offer to my clients would be to just move the part of you that's tight or move your whole self would also work. But, that might be just, sending your shoulders around in circles. It might be doing like a big, stretch. Like, oh man, that feels so good. It can be really simple stuff, but we use the body signals to respond, just like you would if you know, think back to the days when you had toddlers and they would come in and be like, "I need to pee." And you'd be like, "Okay, let's go to the bathroom." You would
yeah.
just kind of respond to the need. Whereas for us, we're like, we
You can
sort of
wait.
try to, yeah, you can wait. Let's push it down. Don't worry about it. And so it's about learning how to respond compassionately.
Mm,
So some of the things that you might notice. So when I notice myself really heightened,
mhm,
so what I've been aware of today is I'm tired. So I can feel that my eyes are kind of dry feeling. They feel quite heavy. When I close them, I'm like, oh, that would be nice just to stay there. I notice that I've been clenching my jaw a little bit, so I can
ah,
feel
yes,
a little bit of tension there.
yeah,
I too can feel that my shoulders have been a little heightened. And I often find I feel like I'm levitating or trying to levitate, right? Like I'm not quite using the gravity. I'm sort of resisting it a little bit. So it feels a little bit like I'm trying to lift off. So what I would do in this scenario is I would be like, oh, that's interesting. I can notice all of those things. One or all of the above. I can tell that I don't feel particularly grounded in this moment, right? All of those things for me are a sign that I'm on high alert.
mm,
And there's reasons for it, which, don't really matter at
mhm,
the moment, but there are reasons why I feel
mhm,
that way. But the question isn't like, well, why do I feel like this? Why is my body doing this? It's like, how do I support myself
yes,
given how I feel?
yes, yes,
So the first place I will always go is how do I come back to earth a little bit? So I call it grounding, and that really encompasses a lot of different practices. But how do I like just get to where I am? Like just be here. I feel my bum in the chair. I feel my feet on the
mm,
floor.
mm,
And immediately
mm,
shoulders drop, jaw
mm,
loosens,
mm,
right? And then I might say, okay, well, like my eyes just want to be closed. Okay, well, maybe I can just close them for a few moments.
mm,
Offer myself that. My shoulders feel tight. Maybe I can just do a few of my favorite movements for my shoulders. Maybe I need to take a couple of deep breaths. Then how do I feel, right? Coming back to that interoception. Even though I didn't even do that properly, like I feel different,
yeah. And I
right?
can hear it. I can hear the difference in
In
you.
my voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, straight
Yeah.
away. Yeah,
Yeah.
just seems calmer.
It's like an octave drops, my
Yeah.
voice gets deeper.
Yes.
I feel much like more grounded, right?
And you're not racing.
Not
It's the
racing.
speed thing. Yeah, you've taken your
Yeah.
foot off the accelerator.
Yes. It's like I found neutral gear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it it's interesting because we have to have ways to interrupt that pattern, because I've been feeling probably like that for a good chunk of today, and I will never beat myself up for missing those cues. I never
Mm,
will,
mm,
because
mm.
to me that's counterproductive. But I'll go, "Oh, now I've noticed. Now I've noticed. What do I need to do to support myself?" It's always one of the most profound questions that you can ask yourself,
Mm.
because it's something that we're not used to doing, and it doesn't have to be very complicated. I had a question come through when I was doing the last call of Soma Home, like last week. Um, and someone sort of said to me, I often miss these cues throughout the day. And it's not until I get to the end of the day that I notice I feel really tight and tense. But I'm sure it's been building up over the week or over the day, right?
Mm.
You look confused. Do you not remember that?
Yeah, no, I do, but I'm now trying to process that and going, how do you know you've missed them? But how do you know?
Ah,
How do you know they're
yeah.
there
So I guess that's when you get to the end of the day and you're like,
and you
I
really feel it?
riddled with tension.
Yeah,
How did I not pick up on this earlier? Because
yeah,
typically that will be the case, right?
yeah.
Or the severity is really kind of higher, I
All right.
guess.
Yeah.
Intensity of that is higher. And what I would say to that is we have to find ways to actually invite noticing of ourselves, because our body, like, depending on what it is you do during the day, for the most part, your job probably doesn't require you to check in with yourself all that often.
Mm.
There's not
Mm.
that many jobs that do, right? So your job, or your, you know, I don't necessarily mean paid jobs either, but like whatever it is that you're doing during the day typically has an outward focus. You're helping someone, you're on the computer, you're cooking meals, you're doing whatever it is that you do. Typically, it is focused on the external, on production, like it
On an
really is,
outcome. Yeah.
on an outcome. And so we have to have moments where we just go, well, what do I notice about me? How do
Mm.
I feel?
Mm.
Where could I use a little bit of support? Where could I use a little bit of mindful kind of pausing to check in with myself and just notice, like, do I need to get up and just go for a walk to the kettle and do a few little
Mm.
shoulder circles on the way and have a bit of a stretch and have a bit of a yawn and, um, do whatever it is that I would feel good in the moment. But we have to give ourselves those opportunities. They don't always just present themselves.
No, and I think there's a permission element in that too. A
Very much
big
so.
permission element, it's not that we can't, because there's always an opportunity to take literally 5 seconds
Doesn't have to
to
take long, yeah.
do a slow exhale or something, breathe in, breathe out, that doesn't take long. But it's recognizing it, yep, being aware of it, yep. But also then the next thing might be, well, I give myself permission to make a change, to do something about it. And that might not be an overly conscious one. I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't know how the brain works like that. But yeah, I don't know. I can't help but think there's a permission element in there too.
Totally. And I think that there's two things that pop to mind when you say that around permission. One of them is we have to believe we have to believe that we're worth the time,
Mm.
but we also have to believe that support is like, how do I want to say it? It's like, if we see the body as the enemy, if we see the body as something that we have to master or control, then we're not going to be looking for where are the needs. We're going to be kind of demonizing the way that it kind of just does normal things. And so I think we really have to, alongside doing those check-ins, we have to be fostering a self-compassionate relationship,
Mm.
because you
Mm.
only give yourself those opportunities if you feel that you can, that permission piece. It's like, I see this so much for women where it's like, I will get to me when everything else is looked after and
Mm.
everything else is work, kids,
Mm.
partners, parents, the environment, literally everything but them. And so to say, well, I'm going to check in with myself multiple times a day and I'm going to give myself something is quite foreign for a lot of
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
It's unusual. It's not something that has felt takeable, and like that's not for me. Um, but like you say, how long does it take to take a big breath? Doesn't take very long. And I'm always reluctant to say this because I don't like what it implies, but oftentimes we need to do those pauses in order to even continue to be productive.
Oh,
Um,
yes, 1000%.
yeah.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
I'm like, don't do it just because it will make you more productive, because that's just like a whole other can of worms. But the reality is, so often when we push and push and push and ignore and ignore and ignore, we just go like our productivity and our impact just does this.
Mm,
And
mm,
it's like, if you just take those moments and you feel more nurtured and you feel more connected and you feel more calm in your body, like it does pay, like it pays off.
yeah.
Um, I did have some little notes here about sort of some really simple ways to do this,
Mhm.
which we've mentioned a couple, but I
Yeah.
want to point out just some of the places that you might check in. So we
Mhm.
both mentioned a couple, like you said your shoulders, I said jaw, my eyes, and that's probably the one that's the loudest for me today. I'm like, oh, my eyes, I need to go get some drops probably. Um, you mentioned your fists when you
Mhm.
were watching the footy. So fists and toes even, like feet curling,
Yeah.
toe curling,
Yes.
clenching your pelvic floor or your bum is really
Mhm.
common, or holding a lot of tension in your tummy. It can also show up in like digestive discomfort, so diarrhea or, you know, kind of like just ugh, in your guts. That can often be a little bit of a stress response as well. And even it can show up in kind of like ruminating thoughts, right? So it might be that's sort of a capacity to notice yourself from the inside out too.
Mm.
So it could show up in any of those ways. And so, literally, what you can do is just set a reminder for like, I don't know, a couple of times a day to just pause and notice that place that I often do hold tension. Am I holding it? Okay,
Yeah, the
yes.
check-in. Yeah.
Here's my teeth super clenched. Can I just take a minute to
Mm,
take a couple of breaths, do that little check in, and then move on with my day?
mm,
Um, but it really is about taking those moments to pause to do the check in and learning little tools that you can use in those little moments. So I haven't talked about this much lately on social media, but I used to talk a lot about the idea of movement snacks.
yes.
And I probably should do some more reels, but this idea that we can do these tiny little movement breaks to give the brain and the body what it wants, which is frequent variable movement, to show, yep, we still know how to use all the
Mm,
bits. We're still okay down here. Like it's all okay. Um, so having the right tools to be able to say, okay, well, when I pause and notice everything's tight, you could go, oh, that's right. I've got that little movement snack up my sleeve, or I've got that little breath practice, or
mm,
I will just go and make a cup of tea and have a bit of a stretch while I'm in the kitchen.
mm,
Or I remember that, 4x4 breathing practice. Maybe I'll just do that for 2 minutes while I wait for my file to upload or whatever it might be. But you have to have the tools, because I think if you are short of the tools, then the check in itself can be kind of frustrating because you're like, okay, well, I'm tense. Now
Now
what
what do I do?
do
Mm,
I
mm, mm.
um,
Yeah.
and so it can help us to kind of like get in front of burnout, overwhelm, those things that can feel like they creep up on us, but they don't always creep up. Sometimes they are literally just like walking into the room, but we're like, it's fine. I'm not going to pay any attention to that. So when we start to pay a little bit more attention, we might just find that by the end of the day, we haven't crept quite so
Mm,
high up into overwhelm.
mm,
And like, when I jumped on, I was a little dysregulated. It's not about getting it always right. It's not about, becoming perfect at any of these things. Like what a ridiculous goal as a human to do anything perfectly, right? It's just never going to happen because we're fallible humans. But the gift that comes with increased self-awareness
mm,
is truly the gift that just keeps on giving, because it means you can really meet yourself with more kindness, with more compassion, with more grace, which I think we need a lot of in midlife.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And yeah, I love that. It's kind of, I think that's almost a perfect place to sign off with because, yeah, and for me, that gets back to permission to do that. It's okay to stop for 5 seconds and do something. It's okay to have a 5 minute break.
Yeah.
But yeah, we often don't give ourselves the grace, the permission to do that. Yeah, and then that's the cumulative effect, isn't it? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have? Can you hear my dog? He's just going nuts. Yeah, that's Rusty. He's hyped now. He's the one that he
He's a
needs
little
me.
overstimulated.
Yeah, he's so stimulated. Absolutely. Might go and give him a cuddle in a minute and see if I can calm him down. But yeah, it's now I've lost my train of thought. But it's I think what a wonderful conversation to have with yourself is the conversation with what's happening in my body and what is my body trying to tell me. What does my body need that would be helpful right now, in those mini moments, not just in the big moments as well. Yeah,
Yes.
what a gift.
And I want to say one final thing that's just popped into mind as you're talking. Sometimes when I work with women in midlife and they've started to have more time up their sleeves, right? And we kind of think about, I'll do this when I have more time. I'll look after myself better when I have more time. Something that I've noticed is not uncommon is that need to be productive follows them, even when there is no external drive for that production, right? Because it kind of becomes such an internalized,
It's a symbol of worth.
it is very much so. And
What?
so
Yeah.
I think if we can get into the habit of doing this, as early as possible, it's really helpful because we start to, plant the seed for that permission that then we can expand. And I think that that's really important because that drive productivity at all costs will find its way even into
Yeah.
the most spacious of places.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. Um, yeah, love it. I don't think there's anything more to say. I think you've given us some handy tips. Yeah, I think it's lovely. And what a gift to be able to be aware of all of that and just keep listening and keep doing. But as you say, not to be more productive, don't fill the gap, don't do more, but just to take care of you with compassion. I think that's lovely.
Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you, Erica, for all your wisdom.
Thanks. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting me, you know, get on my soapbox.
No, not on the soapbox. You're very, very helpful. Yeah, no, it's great. And something else, maybe, because, I always have to say more and I don't know why, but it's just, I don't know, verbal diarrhea sometimes. Um, the other thing that prompted this topic of conversation was I was listening to a podcast, The Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett's podcast. I'm addicted to that podcast. I love it. He has such interesting guests. So, hello, Stephen, if by some miracle you're listening to this, love your work. And he was talking to Simon Sinek, another person I adore, his wisdom. Conversations that these two have are brilliant conversations. And that's what they were tapping into. It was more about a response to emotions, but both of them very accomplished, highly productive individuals going, one of the toughest things I've had to do is try and answer the question, where do I feel that in my body? So this goes back to the very first step that we were talking about, that initial awareness of how does what I'm feeling translate into a physical manifestation in my body.
And it
And
always will.
it always will, yeah. But like you were saying, we're not taught to tune into that. And as they both said, it's freaking hard. And maybe that's why we don't as well, because we live in a world where now you just push through and ignore it. It'll go away, whatever. But I also think it's because it's the harder stuff to do. And, it
It's
takes,
hard. And there's probably, in our Western culture, there's a lot of things that we shouldn't feel that we've been told are not okay to feel. And so, like, as women, being angry is
Mhm.
something that a lot of women really have a hard time with. It's not that they don't feel anger, but they, try to push it down. And so, um, there is always going to be a physical correlation or a physical correlate to the emotion that you're feeling. Always. There just always will be. Even if it's a sense of numbness, there's still something. And yeah, I do think that part of the reason that it's hard to identify is that we also don't really talk about emotion. And so we have maybe a internal cognitive sort of appreciation for like the big four. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm mad, or I don't know what the fourth would be.
Happy,
So
sad, mad, glad. Oh, no.
it rhymes.
Yeah.
But we often don't have, or maybe like jealous, something like that. We have sort of not a very nuanced appreciation of emotion. Whereas often when we're angry, we might actually be resentful or furious or embarrassed. There's so many things that it could actually be. And so getting a little bit more specific with our language can then also help us to be more specific. And it can go either way, right? When you check in with your body, you might be like, actually, that doesn't feel very much like anger. It feels like something else. And that's often the work that I do with counseling clients is like, let's get curious about that feeling. And we can identify potentially how it's protecting the body, but also how it's protecting your ego or how it's protecting, a belief that you might have. But it can also help you to get closer to the truth of that feeling, not just the big kind of ones
Yes.
that we're used to.
What's hidden behind it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, there might be some correlate to that as well in terms of like, I don't sense any stress. But if, we're so, like humans are on one hand, super, super simple. And on the other hand, very complex.
Right.
And so there's some things that, a lot of things could be true at the same time. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, one of the quickest, most effective ways to get better at listening to yourself is to choose to be in a kind relationship with yourself, a compassionate relationship with yourself, because then anything's safe, right?
Yes. Yes.
Anything that you bring to the table in a relationship like that is okay to be heard, is okay to be shared. But if you are the stern mother or you are the stern, headmistress kind of thing to yourself, it's not safe to be angry. It's not safe to be resentful. It's not safe to be jealous or, whatever. So you have to foster that relationship with yourself, at least at the same time. It doesn't necessarily have to come first, but it has to be being fostered at the same time, I think, in order for you to really be able to see what you can kind of dig in to see, because it has to be safe enough to hold it.
Yeah. And when I think of a self-compassionate relationship with self, um, it's a strong relationship with self.
Mhm.
And that's another false belief that we're sold, is that, if you're self-compassionate or you're a softie, and being soft is a sign of weakness. So let's not go there. The
Yeah.
do a million one things because I'm super productive, and that means I'm a go-getter, and that means I'm strong and I'm better than, whatever, then yeah, I think that flies in the face of it, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
harder to tune in, but it's because I think, it's a sign of great strength to be self-compassionate.
It
Definitely.
is. It is. I
Well,
could talk
maybe
for
we should
hours on that, but
I
maybe
was
we'll
about to
leave it
say,
there.
maybe we should do a couple of these little chats about, and maybe dig deeper a little bit into some emotions, the
Mm,
emotions of midlife and how they might manifest.
that would be a
With
great idea.
Yeah, let's work on
Have
that.
you ever read Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart?
Yes, I've got all of Brené's
Best.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often get Atlas of the Heart down with clients because it's such a good way to differentiate emotions. There's like, can't remember how many in there, but there's a lot.
Over 80,
Yeah,
it's
it's
identified.
so good. It's
Yeah.
so good. I love it so much. I've never read it cover to cover, but it's one of those books that
It's a reference.
if anyone's listening thinking, oh, emotion's something that I have a difficult time with, couldn't recommend that book more highly. It's so, so good for just at least sparking curiosity, even if you don't quite yet connect it to something new, to be able to say, oh, wow, I wouldn't have even ever thought of that as an emotion. It's brilliant. I love it a lot.
Yeah, great tip. It absolutely is. Agree. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks so much. What a great chat. And
Always fun.
we'll see everyone same time next week on a Monday. Monday here in Australia. I'm not sure
Yep.
what it'll be for wherever else you are. So and I'm going to make some notes and put that in Substack too, because I think there's some of your great tips, of what you said to do, and
Awesome.
there's some great one-liners too for awareness. So I love all that. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Anita. Always so lovely to chat.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.